Crime is normally a show where I, Rich Slayton, read a true story about lawbreakers to my good friend Jonathan Shefsky, but today it's a little different because good news, our buddy Jonathan David Shefsky is a dad for the second time, and his wife gave birth to a beautiful baby boy less than 24 hours ago, so I'm recording this today on my own, and we're doing something a little different. We'll get into that in a moment, but first, let me tell you about the people who make this show possible. Our good friend Joe Earl from C3 Risk and Insurance Services, and it's an insurance broker. What does that mean? Well, that means that he goes out and finds the right insurance for you, especially for your small business. You can hit him up, c3insurance.com/Joe or 619-233-8000. And if you get a policy with him and tell him that we sent you, he'll give you a $25 gift card to Amazon.com. And, of course, our good friend Dee Kettleson at A Piece That Remains, a P-E-A-C-E, thatremains.com. She does the beautiful cremation art where she incorporates the ashes of your dead loved one or pet into a beautiful painting, or also non-cremation art as well. Now, I noticed right out the gate, you guys are going, whoa, Rich, this is a completely different tone of what I'm used to. You seem calm. And that's what happens when I don't have my good friend Jonathan David Shefsky razzing me the entire time. But also, today's episode is going to be very different from what we're used to. With the last minute knowledge that we weren't able to do a regular crime episode this week, it struck me that I live very close to a courthouse, a very busy courthouse in my part of Los Angeles. So I took my Zoom recorder down to the steps of the courthouse and stood outside and interviewed random people about why they were there and what they did. And I found three very fascinating people to speak with who each come from very different parts of the court experience. So that's why this is entitled Court Life, because we found out about court life. So we're going to visit a few different people, and the last one, really stick around because the last guy we talked to, kind of fascinating. It was a wonderful surprise. But the first person I met was a man, and some of these names are the real names, some of them are not, was a man we'll call Michael, who Michael works as a court interpreter. His job as a Spanish speaker is to help the court communicate with people who don't speak English, who they only speak Spanish or only speak Spanish well. And he does that in a variety of ways. Michael was tall, with long hair and skin that looked like he spent a lot of time in the sun, like he maybe was a surfer or an outdoorsman of some kind. And he had some sort of like a suave attitude to himself. And I think that'll come across when you get to talk to him a little bit, when you hear what he has to say. But I asked him if I could speak with him, and he was really open and excited to tell about what's really important about what he does. So let's go ahead and talk to our interpreter. If you would, tell me your name and what you do here for the court.
Hey, my name is Michael. I'm an interpreter, Spanish language.
Spanish language interpreter. So I'm guessing here in Los Angeles that your services are in high demand.
That's true. There are about 300 or 400 of us serving the courts daily in LA County alone.
In LA County alone?
Right. True. From Long Beach on the far south all the way up to Antelope Valley on the northeast, and then Sherman Oaks and Van Nuys and San Fernando area too.
So, Michael, what drew you to being a courthouse interpreter?
I love language, and I enjoy helping people, and this is an area where I feel like I don't have the stress of what the outcome of a case is or is not. I just want to do a great job and be faithful to the language.
So do you mostly find yourself, is most of your interpretation done in a courtroom or in other situations?
Courtroom, although I'm starting to do work which is called transcribing, where I listen to recordings of, for example, somebody made a phone call on a cell phone to a loved one, or maybe to a crimey, as they call it in the field, and that needs to be transcribed because it's in Spanish and then translated into English.
So is there any time, one thing about language is aphorisms, right? A turn of phrase that makes sense in one language and doesn't in another, right? It might have a cultural meaning. Have you encountered those in this context and tried to find a way to make something that makes sense in Spanish make sense in English?
Yes, many of the phrases that we're familiar with in English have good translations in Spanish, and they're completely different in terms of the words, if you looked at it word for word and broke it down, but the meaning is captured. So we have that. So, for example, it's raining cats and dogs. The translation for that in Spanish has nothing to do with animals. It has to do with simply a word that implies volume of something huge and massive happening all at once.
What's the Spanish phrase?
The Spanish phrase is está lloviendo a cántaro,
which would translate roughly to?
It would be more like it's raining an avalanche. Something like this.
That sounds frightening, raining a whole entire avalanche. So you've been here in this position for how long?
About 12 years.
So you've seen pretty much everything at this point.
Yes. A lot of the crimes are quite serious, for sure, but all the way down to just traffic, too.
Is there any crime or any case that you've worked with that stands out where where you were surprised by what you saw and what you heard?
There are plenty of cases where folks reveal very much information about their case during a recording, during a call that they know is being recorded. For example, if you're in jail and I'm your brother and come visit you and you just killed 8 guys, you shouldn't tell me that, but you go ahead and tell me anyway.
So can I, again, this is completely anonymous. Are you saying that you once translated a call where someone admitted to killing 8 guys on the phone?
No, it's never that egregious, but it might be more. You see that a lot in domestic violence cases and things like this, where somebody says, "Well, I overdid it. I didn't mean it, sweetie, to go that far," and that in and of itself is an admission of sorts.
Sure. Have you ever had a situation where someone was speaking Spanish and thought they were that they weren't being listened to or recorded, or that they were getting away with saying something they shouldn't because they were speaking Spanish, but you kind of stepped in and exposed what they were talking about?
I haven't had that yet, and I try to be not an activist for either side, because I frankly need to be professional and really not care whether you killed 100 people or killed 0 people. That's up to the lawyers. They're trained, and for the most part, these guys are very professional on both sides, defense and prosecution.
Has there ever been a crime that you've translated for that when you went home that night, you laughed, that you just thought this was a hilarious thing that I never would have thought that I would have come to this position? And if so, can you give me some broad strokes?
Sure. Yeah, without revealing any names, so to speak, right? There was something many years ago that was a relatively minor crime, but it was really quite hilarious because the person who hired me at the time was the defense attorney who wanted to make sure that they had properly recorded the statements of the victim in basically domestic violence case where one spouse beat up the other spouse. And when I had been given some of the details by the defense in advance, I went in expecting to see this very petite, diminutive, frightened female, and instead it was this big, huge guy talking about how his lady had just kicked his butt.
Tats and everything?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it goes all different ways. Yeah, sometimes just things that you don't expect. Is there any moment that you've had here that, obviously the justice system is a tough thing, right? Sometimes the justice system works out perfectly. Sometimes it works out in a way that, you'd hope that the cards had fallen differently. Has there been a moment here where you've been a part of a case where you're like, oh, this justice did good. This came out in a way that maybe I didn't expect, but came out in a way that was that makes me believe more in what I'm doing?
It's hard to think of a specific one because I just see a lot of the work up and homework that these guys do, and oftentimes to a layperson it looks like, oh, this is very clear, this person is innocent, or this is very clear, this person did not run the red light, or this is very clear, there was a domestic violence. And sometimes it isn't that clear, and what I love about the system is that there's so much work that goes into it beforehand that generally I really do see fair outcomes that just make sense and can be supported down the road, and we can all feel good that, well, we did our homework, thank God.
And I guess, Michael, last question for you. What is the most rewarding part of the job that you do?
I love giving voice to people who either are voiceless because they don't speak English, but I also see the flip side. The judges and the lawyers are often voiceless with their witnesses or defendants because they don't speak proper Spanish. So I love being that bridge and making sure that everyone's not only words, but intonations and feeling and the real meaning gets through to everyone. This is very important for humans.
That was Michael, the courtroom interpreter, and it was fascinating how he viewed his job as a way of giving a voice to people. I found that to be so interesting, because you might think of translation as sort of a rote job, sort of a almost in some ways an unromantic job. But you're not speaking your own words, you're speaking someone else's words. But Michael takes his job very seriously, as you can hear from what he told me, and it was really, really fascinating to listen to how he viewed the responsibility of that job. The next person I was lucky enough to capture for an interview, and I'm really surprised he stopped, actually, as I think about this on the back end. But I saw a man in a nice suit with a briefcase and files in his hand walking away from the courthouse. And I assumed, I just made the call, this guy's here for a purpose. This guy's here with a reason. Of course, one of the most important roles in the court system is that of the defense attorney, the one who goes in and advocates for you for whatever reason it is that you're here at the court, and we're standing by with a defense attorney. Would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Nasser Corey, Khoury.
And you're a defense attorney for how long?
27 years. I started out as a deputy district attorney for the first 2 years of my career, and now I'm a defense attorney.
Was the plan always to move into being a defense attorney, or is that just kind of the way that your career took you?
That's the way the career took me, and hopefully next year I'll be a judge.
Next year you want to be a judge? Talking about like local district judge or?
Here, Superior Court.
Very, very cool. So you've been a defense attorney for 20-something on years. Do you have a specialty?
Just criminal defense.
Criminal defense. And in Los Angeles, I'm sure there's plenty of that.
It ranges from petty theft all the way to murder and anything in between.
So have you defended capital murder cases?
Sure, yes.
How many? A ballpark?
Oh, I can't. 2, 3. I have current pending criminal murder cases as well. All kinds of cases, drug cases, federal cases, state cases.
Wow. And so that's actually a question I think our listeners would love to hear more about is, obviously you're dealing with a wide variety of people, and sometimes you walk into a room and you're dealing with someone who professes their innocence, sometimes someone who you believe they're innocent, sometimes someone who maybe you don't believe they're innocent, but they deserve to be represented as much as anybody else. How do you compartmentalize that as you approach a client?
I never ask them whether they did it or not. That's not an important issue. Just like you said, they have a right to be represented by an attorney, whether it's a public defender or a private lawyer. So you just have to look at the facts, the evidence, and if it's there, you talk to them about it and try to get the best deal that you can for them. If they have some issues that you can file motions to exclude evidence or dismiss evidence, then you do it. But whether or not they're guilty is not an issue. The only issue is, should you defend them and defend them 100%.
And that's what you do every single time?
That's what you do, and the Constitution says they're presumed innocent until they're proven otherwise. And my kids always like, what do you mean they're innocent? I go, they're innocent. That's what the law says. That's what the Constitution says. A lot of people have a hard time with that concept. And when I do trials, when I do jury trials, that's the very first issue that I make sure that the prospective jurors understand that my client is innocent and he or she does not have to do anything. It's the DA's job that they have to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
So talking about jury trials, jury selection, obviously a really important part of how you kind of craft your entire defense. What goes into your thought process when you're going through jury selection?
Well, you have to look and see if they're old, if they're young. There's a whole process that you have to go through. Do they have a stake in the community? Do they care what happens? You generally, as a defense attorney, you want to pick young people. You never want to pick somebody that works for the Postal Service. There's a lot of things that go on, a lot of thoughts.
Hold on, that's fascinating. Never want to pick someone who works for the Postal Service. Why?
They tend to be more alone most of the time. They tend to be more depressed. They don't care about things like the average person. And a lot of other people don't want to be there. College students, they don't have a stake in the community. They could be visiting from another area and they don't care. They don't care about the safety of the community. Whereas if you pick somebody who's retired or somebody who's married, who has kids, they want to make sure that the area they live in is secure and criminals are off the street. So it's a whole process. That's just a little tiny example.
I mean, that's a very small but very important part of the entire process. So in 20 plus years of criminal defense, has there ever been a crime you've been called to defend for that made you laugh, where you went home and you were like, I cannot believe that someone even attempted this?
No, nothing surprises me. People do the craziest things all the time. I mean, I could write books about some of the cases that I've defended. It's just like, wow, nothing surprises me.
Very, very quick, broad strokes. Is there one of those craziest things that kind of stands out where it's your cocktail party? Oh my God, I can't believe this happened.
Well, yeah, I had a client that actually went to Crescent City, which is like 20 miles south of the Oregon border. And she went to visit her husband in jail. Signs all over the facilities: you cannot bring in any alcohol or drugs onto state prison grounds. And in the trunk of her car, in a bag that she left in her car, had 2 little small bottles of scotch. She actually got arrested, and she was charged with 2 counts of felony for bringing alcohol onto prison grounds. And I literally had to work a miracle with the DA up in Crescent City to have him drop the charges to a misdemeanor and just have her pay a fine. Otherwise, she would have been convicted of a felony.
For having 2 little mini fridge-sized bottles in her back of her car.
Because the law says, and the sign says, you cannot bring it onto prison grounds and you're subject to search.
Wow.
So they searched her vehicle, and sure enough, those there were there. They arrested her and they charged her. That was mind-boggling, but that's what they did.
So now you are moving towards the desire to become a judge. What motivates you? Why is it that you want to move from what you're doing now to becoming a judge?
Well, I ran 2 years ago. I was on the ballot in 2016. I've did it all. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a defense attorney. Being a judge gives you a different perspective. You really have to listen to people. You can't be advocating for one side or the other. You really have to listen and then be fair and apply the law to every case as you see fit.
So, is there any experience you've had in your years doing this that, obviously you believe in the justice system very deeply. Is there any specific experience that you can point to that stands out as reinforcing that belief?
Everything I do every day. It's just like sometimes judges make decisions, they're right and they're wrong, and sometimes you wonder, wow. And that's why we have a justice system like no other in this whole world, actually. If you don't like what a judge does, you can appeal him, and 3 other judges will listen and decide whether or not he was right or you were right. And that's what makes it amazing. It's an amazing system. It's an amazing justice system in the United States. And I love it.
And final question, we jokingly call our listeners the criminals because we tell criminal stories. And do you have any advice if there's some young person out there who's like, I'm considering a life of crime, whether I want to be a burglar or what advice do you have for them?
Do not do it, because once you get hooked into the criminal justice system, you'll never get out. And it prevents you from having job opportunities, going to school, advancing your careers. So my advice is never to do it, ever, ever, ever do it. And just be safe and follow the law.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Good luck.
So that was Nasser Corey, who we were very lucky to kind of happen upon. And Nasser did run for Superior Court Judge in 2016 for LA County Superior Court Judge. And he came in 4th. The top 2 ended up getting seats. That was Kim Nguyen and David Berger, who I think David Berger might have just been up for re-election again. And Nasser Corey took in 12.6% of the vote, 189,575 votes. So the 2 leaders had 500 and 400,000, but almost 200,000 votes is no small task as well. So, maybe we'll see Nasser on the ballot again in 2020. as he continues to work towards being a judge. And, you know, I found him to be a very measured, very thoughtful person. I think that came across in the conversation. And, you know, one thing you don't think about a lot with the court system is the idea of trying to be impartial, right? Especially on our show, we run into so much partiality, especially with some of these court cases that took place in the 1800s. But, you know, the idea that you're supposed to approach every conversation, every case from a clean slate. And I think that Nasser really took that to heart. So that was fascinating. Our last interview of today's episode is the most fascinating one, and the reason why I told you to stick around for this entire episode. I overheard this man talking to someone on a phone as he walked past me, and what I heard him say made me stop and ask him for an interview when I saw him off the phone. And what I heard him say was, if they ask me about that, I'll just plead the fifth. And I found that fascinating. So we got a chance to speak to Jordan, who I was really excited when he said yes. Jordan's 25 years old, a tall guy, you know, looks like he could have played football in high school, maybe in college, with a Raiders jacket on, diamond earrings, very charming smile, very charming personality. And Jordan was there at the court that day for a very, very heavy and kind of shocking reason. And so I knew that it was a good idea to ask him if he would speak, and I'm really glad that he did. So let's go ahead and talk with Jordan. So today we've heard from some people who love courthouses, and now we hear the opposite side. The first thing you said to me when I approached you, Jordan, was that you hate courthouses.
Hate courthouses. The judicial system I feel like is not fair to certain individuals, male and female. So that's kind of why I don't like being here, and it's just a waste of time. Just like
a waste of time.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm not here for nothing. For me personally, I'm just here for an incident that was involving homicide. So I'm just like a witness.
Can you tell me the broad strokes of the incident? You're not, again, no snitching, no naming names.
Yeah.
Just
someone was murdered with a crowbar.
With a crowbar.
Yeah.
Like a beating.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So that's why I'm here. I got subpoenaed, so I had to be here.
Wow. And what context? So was this at a nightclub? Was it at a
house?
At a house, just middle of the day?
No, it was at night. Yeah.
And from your estimation, why was the person murdered?
Man, I don't think I could share that, but I honestly don't know, because
was it?
I went to Taco Bell, came back, and that's what we ran into. I wasn't there that time of the incident, but I saw like the aftermath and like of everything.
Damn. So you went to Taco Bell. So this is the most important question.
I was gone for like 30 minutes, came back. Walking in, I was pretty hot too. So me and my girlfriend walked in, and then people were walking out the side of the house, and that, like, from there is pretty much it.
Well, first of all, do you know what kind of weed you were smoking?
OG all day.
All right. I can dig that. So you get blazed. Yeah. You go to Taco Bell. What do you get at Taco Bell?
Just bean burritos. I don't eat fast food like that, but at the time it was like sounded really good.
Yeah, you were baked, so of course it sounded fantastic. So let's set the stage. You're at a house with some people. You're having a good time.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. We weren't at like the gathering they had. Me and her just popped up for a quick minute, and then like we probably weren't even there 5 minutes. Wow. And then we showed up, said hello, and then left. And then we came back, and that's what we ran into.
So you get bean burritos. You're blazed. You're listening to some dope music, probably.
Quick. Yeah, super dope music.
What was on the stereo?
I was playing Kendrick.
Okay.
Good Kid, Mad City at the time. I remember. It's like, stuff like that you don't forget. Like, and that happened in almost 2 more days. Would have been a year exactly. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you know either of the participants?
I knew of one. Just like, hey, how you doing? What's up? But I didn't know him personally. But I didn't know the guy who is deceased either.
So that's, people always, I guess the question everyone always asks when it comes to crime, especially one like this, is why?
Only they know, man. That's, I wish everyone the best in this situation. I know, people make mistakes and this and that, but that I don't have an answer, man.
So this isn't your first time at a courthouse though, because you said I hate courthouses.
Yeah, like a speeding ticket, no seatbelt, but that's little stuff, nothing major though. I mean, I paid the fine, so.
But this is next level.
It's just a waste of time, and I feel sorry. I mean, I guess you could say like, people who go to jail constantly that are in their 40s, they don't learn. See, I'm 25. I was arrested and spent like 2 days in jail, but I wasn't even supposed to. So, I mean, I got in trouble for an incident, but it didn't cause me to go to jail, but they arrested me anyway. So
can you tell me, would you be willing to tell me a little bit about the incident? No, not at all.
No, that's behind me. It's done with. It's over, done with. Like, I don't even got a court for it no more. Like, it was a DA reject. It was something stupid. Like I said, I wasn't even supposed to go. The judge saw him and was like, why did you even get arrested? Like, not arrested, but why did you? Because I was only supposed to be, like, withheld and detained. Just, like, for, like, mentally. I wasn't supposed to, since I didn't really do nothing wrong. It was just mentally for a psych evaluation. But they arrested me anyway.
So in that case, though, the system worked out the right way for you.
Yeah, pretty much. It did. Yeah. But, for some people, it doesn't work out like that, which is unfortunate because, people got kids, jobs. A lot of innocent people go to jail every day, so.
So is this your first time giving testimony in a court?
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why I have to is because I got subpoenaed. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. Are you nervous about it at all? No, I'm not nervous. It just brings up memories of that night of the incident, and it's just something. Yeah, I mean, I'm not nervous now. Nothing to be nervous about.
Now, I'll edit this next thing out if you want me to, but as you part of why I stopped you was you walked by the first time. I heard you on the phone. You said, if something, I'll plead the fifth.
Yeah, bro, because I was like, when the DA talked to me, they told me this stuff would happen, that stuff would happen. I went in court and none of that stuff happened. So I'm just like, I'd rather just, because I guess I held on my side of the deal. I'm here. Them on the other hand. So now it's just like, because I told them that when this happened stuff last year when they were questioning everybody, I was like, it's anonymous on my end. Like, so it was, and I was like, if it goes to court or whatever, I'm not testifying because that's not my thing. And then just the people that were involved, just like they know a lot of people. And that's not something I want to be involved in. So it's just, yeah.
And that's something you don't really think about is, so you giving testimony in this case, like you actually, to a certain degree, feel like, I don't want them to know that I'm talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 4 or 5 other people testifying too. So there hasn't been any names dropped. So.
And I guess final question for you is, what kind of verdict do you expect in this case?
Yeah, man. See, I'm not. That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry for who for the gentleman who lost his life, the person who committed it. That's on them. They made that choice. At the end of the day, they got to deal with that with God. I'm not the one to judge anybody, man. So, yeah, whatever the judge thinks is best. Yeah, I don't really care for the justice system. I mean, I do to a certain extent, but it's not something like I'm not into politics. I hate politics because it's like a lot of politicians are crooks anyway. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like it's a hypocrites when it comes to, I guess, the justice system and also politics. So I don't follow it. I don't care for it. But when it affects innocent people and people that deserve a fair, I guess, trial, then that's when I'm like concerned. So.
All right, and I guess one more final question. You're listening to Kendrick.
Yeah.
What are you listening to today?
Ooh, man, that's a good one. Let me see. Hold on. Well, the stuff I've been jamming to lately, I've been listening to Tory Lanez, I guess Moneybagg Yo, Young Dolph, Trippie Redd, Young Thug, love Young Thug, Drake, of course, Travis, Davies. Yeah.
Well, I hope that your afternoon is much more relaxed, man. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thanks.
Jordan and I spoke for quite a while after we finished the interview, maybe as long or if not longer than the interview took itself. And he told me some things that I'm not going to talk about on the show because, he wanted to keep them off the record, so to speak. But it was really fascinating to talk with him about his journey. And he's a musician. He's also currently looking to go to business school. He already has his undergraduate degree and hoping to expand himself further in both of those ways. But it was really interesting to talk about the what the experience actually was like that night and how it's affected his life since. Things we didn't get into on the air so much. He was much more forthcoming once we weren't recording anymore. But yeah, one thing you don't think about when we talk about crime is the witnesses, the people who are the bystanders, the people who kind of get drawn into something because they were simply there, and they're not the victim, they're not the perpetrator, they're just there. They're also a part of it. And so he's, compelled to come to the courthouse and give his testimony, gave what he saw. So today we got to talk to 3 different parts of the justice system. Of course, we started with Michael, the translator, and how seriously he takes his job, and why he finds that important, and giving a voice to people. And then we talked to Naser Khoury, the one-time prosecutor and then 20-year-long criminal defense attorney and now hopeful judge, and his focus on impartiality, on the real ethos behind the justice system. And then finally with Jordan, who isn't a fan of the system at all, but who was there and who saw something crazy happen and found himself pulled in to something he didn't really want to be a part of. But, he told me later that he talked it over. He thought about it for a long time. Not for a long time, but he thought about it for a little while before he came forward. And he eventually just felt like it was a thing he had to do. It was the right thing to do. So even though he didn't want to be there, he took that responsibility on himself. So, I thought that was a real statement of character on his part. Because you think about that, right? In a situation like that, maybe for whatever reason it is, do you want to involve yourself? And he made the choice that he couldn't not. And I think that's very respectable. So that's going to be it for today's episode. I know this was way different from what you guys are used to, the normal pile of jokes and such, but without my partner in crime here, I felt like we should do something different, and I had an inspiration to go down and talk to people. So, I don't know what we're going to do exactly over the next few weeks as Jonathan, as Shefsky deals or works at being a brand new dad once again with his beautiful baby boy, who I'm very excited to meet. I'll probably be meeting him hopefully later this week. But we're going to get back to regular episodes soon. We'll get those integrated in. But we might do more things like this, just more creative stuff on the alternating weekends or alternating weeks. So more interview stuff. Let us know if this is something that you found interesting. I wanted to do an experiment with this opportunity. If you want us to stick with the dick jokes, I'm always happy to, of course. But this, I've had inspiration and opportunity today to do something different, and so here we are. This has been Court Life with just me, your boy Rich Slayton, and make sure to, if you want to, jump on the Patreon for all the silliness, because that will never stop there. That's going to be straight up 100% silliness forever. And we'll be back next week with more crime. We have some really fun stories planned of the normal variety. And thank you guys for really staying with us over the last few months between myself having the baby and now John having a baby, and us trying to figure out how we can make this show continue to work in various ways and try some different stuff out. But don't you worry. The regular making fun of people's tragedy will come back in its normal form. So for my boy John, and for his brand new baby, and for me, bye, robot.